Terry Stratton, Director of Education and Outreach here at the Guild. So on behalf of the Guild, I say happy holidays to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And please turn off your cell phones, your pagers, your watch alarms, anything that's going to make noise, please. We are live streaming this evening, so if you could keep it down to a dull roar, that would be fantastic. Save all of your questions for the end. We will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of the event. And when you ask your questions, if you could please stand up and speak clearly so the people over live stream can hear them. They may have the exact same question and we want to make sure they can hear it. All right? Without further ado, I want to thank the fantastic Michael John LaChiusa, of whom I am the biggest fan on the planet. These are former Dramatist Guild Fellows, and they will be playing a little bit of their wonderful stuff for Michael John. He will be critiquing it. That's for Michael John, so keep your critiques to yourself, though I'm sure they would love to hear them afterwards. Okay? So enjoy, everybody.
Hi everybody, it's so great to be here tonight. Thank you so much, Terry, for having me here. I'm really excited about seeing all you guys here. Wonderful to see the fellows. I'm happy about this. It's going to be fun tonight to hear some of your new material. Some of these are some of my NYU students who are a petition program here. I'm very excited about hearing what they've been working on. I'm very excited about it. I'm assuming a lot of us are songwriters here or involved in the theater, playwrights, yes, generally. So, I mean, to talk about songwriting in the theater, I mean, it's kind of, I feel like I'm like, you know, you probably know more about it than I do in a lot of respects, you know. I mean, when people ask me, I'm sure you get the same question, which comes first, when people say to you, well, do you write the lyrics or do you write the music first? And I always say, well, I always need something to base the song on when I write. And if I'm writing my own libretto, generally I'll write like a great portion of it, and it's anything goes. I'll write like a major passage of a scene once I find the project. I'll write a major passage, you know, a lot of words, a lot of dialogue, write like a monologue, soliloquy, giant scenes, and then when I feel like I've had enough material and I feel like I can find a pulse beat in a particular scene, and I know which is the point where the characters are going to start singing, I'll go to the piano. And then it starts turning into lyric, and then it starts turning into melody. So it all begins with, I believe, the libretto. And I don't know how we do it without a good libretto. And that's one of the things that I've been just, you know, working on all my life, is to try to develop, you know, when I write on my own, to write my own libretto, or if I'm working with another librettist, to help them, you know, because I believe that it's also the composer and the lyricist's responsibility to turn that play or that subject matter or that topic into the libretto as well as it. You can't leave it all up to the librettist to do that. And that's one of the things that makes songwriting for me so much fun, because I can help them. I can pick and choose what it is that I want to turn into a song and not have the librettist determine that for me necessarily. I mean, I've worked with collaborators, very, very good playwrights too, who don't quite get the essence of what it is that we do as composers or songwriters when we look at a piece of material that we want to musicalize. And they very often will turn into a work, a long scene, or, you know, characters, and at the end of the whole beautiful scene, beautifully wrought, beautiful words, at the end of the scene it goes in brackets, song. And you go, I always go, well, no, I'm going to take your beautiful words, I'm going to take the best material, I'm going to take the heartbeat, I'm going to take the skeleton, you know, the gore, I'm going to turn that into the song. You know, I did do this to one time to a collaborator. I did write him back, and I just wrote on a piece of music paper, song. No music, nothing, wherever. So it's hard to sometimes. So a lot of playwrights, you know, when they want to write musicals, they sometimes don't understand that the very, very best work is what's going to be the thing that's going to be the basis for our song. Now, for myself, everybody has a different process. Like, we all have different processes when we go into a song. I'd be so curious to know what yours are. Maybe we can talk about that afterwards, because I don't think any one person is the same when it comes to time to, you know, turn something into a musical. Everybody has a different take and a different process to do that. For me, I always feel it comes from a character, and when it comes time for me to say, okay, this is where I want that song to happen, I have to put myself in that character's place. And it starts with, I started off as a drummer, a percussionist, not a piano player. And I
think that's why I always go for the heartbeat of the scene. And if I can define what the heartbeat is in the scene, if the character is happy, it's here. If it's panicked, it's here. If it's in love, it's, you know, that. And I feel like that sort of helps define where I want to go musically with a piece. So I always very often start with what that rhythm of that scene is going to be for me. And then, of course, all the other things fill in. If I have a melody in my head that that's been bothering me all night in my dreams, I will write that down. It might be a piece of crap, but you have to write it down in any old way, and maybe that develops into something else and leads you to someplace new. So it always starts from character for me. And a lot of my songs are very, very much rooted in character. There are songs that, a lot of songwriters will write songs that are like that in one number that can be taken and moved out of the show or whatever. But I find it far more interesting to keep it really locked into the character and what that situation that the character may be in. Because that to me is action. And I don't know if a lot of my stuff can be lifted from shows without the context of it all, but it's not something that I actually, as a goal, was ever particularly interested in. I mean, everybody, I think we all have had our opportunities where we were, walking down the New York street and we go, do I go left or do I go right here right now, And I chose this, that way to go as opposed to going left, which would have made me a lot of money now. Really, seriously, I love writing the pop tunes and stuff. But very early on I said, no, I wasn't going to do that. There was something about the theater to me that intrigued me more, made me live happier. Even though now I live as poor as possible, on and off, barely keeping that roof over my head and feeding myself, although you can tell it from, I just opened Giants, so I'm fat, or we all get fat. So you got that on the camera, right? So the thing is that the theater for me, maybe it's also too because I'm a good Catholic boy, that the Mass was always the most theatrical thing I've ever experienced. It still is, one of the most theatrical things to go and visit. And I feel like the theater is that ritual. And I feel like through the song we're consecrating something, we're reenacting something, some sort of cathartic thing. And it is through song that happens. When I was teaching in Korea just recently, a lot of songwriters are very interested in writing in Korea now, but theater, very intrigued by it all. But their influences are all quite European. Very few of them know very little of Rodgers and Hammerstein material, or even Sondheim is not relatively known over there. And their basis of information, what they learn from songs is sort of the European take on things, maybe the Frank Wildhorn stuff. And a lot of those songs, for me, and again, it's all subjective. Some of you may love the stuff, some of you, some of you may agree with me. Some of those songs stay in one place. There's no A to B to Z development in the character. And I find it very difficult for actors to do that kind of stuff, and I want to always write something that's going to challenge that actor to take me through a cathartic experience for that character. And it's very tricky when I was teaching there in Korea to explain to some of the artists that were performing these songs that there's no development in this. There's absolutely no journey that the character is going on in here. So therefore, myself as an audience member, I'm listening to you sing really well, and you're singing very powerful notes, and the melody has a nice hook, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do in that. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel at the end of it all, except to give you praise. And I don't know if that's theater for me. And I want to feel something, and that's why I strive in my songs in the theater that I do, to try to have that effect happen to me. If I don't have it, then I know I've done something wrong with it all. And so that's sort of that was a fascinating, little tangent there, going to Korea and learning more about writing musicals than I ever thought I would learn about writing them. Obviously, when we teach at NYU at or the BMI workshop, how many of you have done BMI workshop here? So you know how you survived. You're still surviving it. Gosh, I made it through 3 years of that, and I said, oh, this is hurting. But all those programs are really great because they also do break it down into structure, and I think that is so fundamental to all of us who write songs. That, and I tell my first-year students at NYU, I really find it okay to, when you're starting out to write songs, to go to the classics. it's okay to emulate Gershwin's lyrics. It's okay to emulate Cole Porter's lyrics. It's okay to emulate that. You want to imitate them, but it's good to emulate them because there's structure. And once you learn those classic structures, you can take that structure out to its length wherever you want it to go. And that to me is something that's very, very, very important. The hardest thing for me to write is the 32 bar song. I mean, that's hard. I don't know what's in 32 bars anymore these days, but those are tricky, and you realize the genius behind the Tin Pan Alley writers. And once you grasp that and sort of hold it your own and make it your own, filter it through yourself, there's many more paths are open to you as a songwriter. So I always say go back to the classics. I myself do it all the time too. My mom used to collect sheet music. You know, we go to the yard sales and buy the sheet music, buy the boxes and stuff, and then I'd have to play them for her and her sisters while they sang through every song. I mean, this would start like at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then it'd be like 2 o'clock, and these Italian ladies wailing at the top of their lungs. It was fabulous. But through the process of doing that, I also learned a wealth of information about songs from the turn of the century, last century, all the way through to the next turn of the century. So that was a great, great experience. And I always tell my students, please, 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 always go and explore and do your research that way too. Because it just offers you such a valuable tool when you sit down and say your show is set in the 40s and you want that flavor, that soup song of the 40s. Well, what song would you pick for that? You know, and to know that and have that at your fingertips and available to you is really, really healthy because you can live in that place there, that world, as long as you filter it through your own sensibilities. I think that's the hardest part about it for me is when it comes time to sit down and write musicals, because it takes so long to write them. People think, get this done, and then like 10 years later, you get your show happening, Giants happening downtown. And we started that, gosh, I think in 2007 it was. Of course, the time writing it is like, if you were to condense it, would come down to about 2 months. Really. But the length of time that it takes to get a show up and all the mechanics involved with it all and all that stuff that goes on with it all, it could be well into 5 years. So you want to make sure for yourself that, at least for myself, when I go into my music room and sit at that piano, I want to go back to that world. I want to make sure that I go back to that place where the music is going to transport me back to wherever this show is taking place in. If I'm setting it in Siam, I want to make sure that I want to go back to that place. And that's the hardest thing. And you always know, I always know when I don't have it, and I go, oh, I've got to throw that one out. That's not engaging me. That's not transporting me to the new place. And that to me is very, very important for people. We have to do some things sometimes, I think, for professional reasons to make our monies and do that. I write for Wonder Pets. I love that series. It's really, really a lot of fun. But it's not something it's like, I try to do the worst job I can for that, just to get fired. I mean, they won't fire me. Because of television, I find like the worse I do, the worse I write, the more they keep me on. So hopefully how it is. But I'm only joking. The thing is that to make sure that I'm in that world, and because you're going to have to live in that world for so long in that process, you have to want to go back to that world every morning and live in there. It's very, 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 very tricky thing to do. How many are you involved in collaborations here? Oh, and you're still alive too. I wish that there's no way to teach collaboration except to do it, because that's what it's all about. And people say, so that song is so beautiful. Thank you. Oh my God, I love that song so much. You write a really good song. I go, it's not just me. This comes from like the source material. This comes from like my book writer. This comes from the director's ideas. They're saying that's too friggin' long. Cut it. All those things, they feed into that thing of collaboration. I think that's the healthiest thing, and it is also to the most dangerous thing. It's very difficult. Myself, sometimes I work alone. I do write my own book and my own lyrics and my own music, but it's primarily for expediency's sake. Because I've worked with so many slow book writers that I just want to scream about it. Because it's not that I want to work fast, just that I want to get the job done. But it is very, very lonely, and I don't recommend it to people to do that. I think you should go home, and it's like the Sybil complex. You know, you go home and you start arguing with your, the composer's yelling at the lyricist, and the lyricist is screaming, and the book writer's giving everybody the silent treatment. And meanwhile, your cat's looking at you like, okay, feed me, or I'm leaving, you know. So it's very, very lonely to do that without a collaborator. I always cherish it, but it is a very tricky negotiation. I'm right? Am I not right about the fun things in collaboration? You know, people said, what are the do's and don'ts of collaboration, and how that makes for a better song. And I think that is the thing that you in your first draft, I always say to my collaborators, whatever. You know, give me whatever. There is no judgment call in this song. I respect the very fact that you can set pen to paper. And I think it all begins there, because if you can have respect for your collaborator, you're going to have respect for yourself. And it makes it a stronger a way of dealing with things. I mean, and because you're going to really need that strength somewhere down the line. You want your collaborator to respect you too when you turn in a song that just doesn't quite make it. And you know, and as opposed to saying to the your collaborator, oh man, I can't work with this at all, you have to offer the suggestions as to how to make it work better if your collaborator's willing to listen to it all. So it's a joint thing. You have to just hold hands and jump off the deep end of the pool, as I did with Sybil right now. Sybil Pearson wrote my book for the Giant downtown, right now playing down there. And she did a magnificent job with that thing, translating that tone into this show downtown there. And it took a lot of work, but we worked very, very closely together and had great mutual respect for each other. And I had to kick her a lot to get the work done. She's she was and she knows that I had to do it because we're all procrastinators, I think, to a certain extent. And but she really delivered the goods and gave me moments of the most beautiful things that I could musicalize as a songwriter. It was a really, really great thing to do that in that collaboration. So if you can find that collaborator that you really feel that you mutual respect with, that's giving you the material that's going to make you sing and write beautiful lyrics, hang on to that collaborator for dear life, okay? Hang on to that person, because that's something that should be really treasured and will make your own work better in the long and short of it. I don't know. Would you want to talk about basics of things? I don't know. You all seem to know the basics of it all. But maybe I should ask this during the Q&A. I'm just so curious about the rhyming thing. I've had a big debate with my students at NYU about rhyming, because some of them still want to rhyme rain and again, or gain and sane. And I'm going, but I think they keep saying that's been broken down now. We're all done with that. I'm thinking, I don't think so. Because I just don't think so. Because if you don't love wordplay, if you're not in love with the wordplay as a lyricist, I don't know why, first of all, you should be a lyricist. You just love it. And then I don't know why you would not, if you don't love puzzles and solving mysteries, why you would be doing that, because that's essentially what it's all about. Now, composers, we have to be mathematicians. There's a lot of math. We don't have to know any law, but we do have to know our math when we're composers. Lyricists is a different thing. It's like solving that jigsaw puzzle or doing that anagram or just doing all that stuff. And I don't know how you don't want to find out or realize that solution. And I keep saying, how things fall on the ear is part of the joy of songwriting. So that's my biggest, I'll share with you, that's one of my big things when I teach at NYU is to talk to the students and say, it's okay to, express yourself the way you need to express yourself. But, on the other hand, there's something about craft and due diligence about that makes you a better person, I think. That you've gone an extra yard to craft the right sound. To tickle my ear, to make myself delight. To paraphrase the Yip Harburg thing there, that the song is that three-dimensional entity. It combines the brain, which is the lyric, and the heart, which is the music. And by combining these two things, we have the three-dimensional idea, an idea in three-dimensional form. And all ideas are about the brain and contain the brain and the heart. And I just think there's a diligence about trying to be, I don't know, you don't have to be perfect with it, but you do have to know what the rights and the wrongs are about that thing. Because craftspersonship, I think, is just so important, and you can't lose that. And I see an awful lot of that happening with a lot of songs, and songs that I hear on Broadway or off Broadway even young composers coming up and I go, oh, you know, why did you do that? Now I'm unhappy. You know, I always tell my students, you can have a Michael John out there in that audience in the dark, scowling at you. So keep in mind, I'll come into your dreams like Freddy Krueger and rip your brain out or something like that. So, you know, it's like, but the diligence is really important, and you have to have the soul with it too, as well. And so it can't be all about rhyme. There has to be a reason for all of that. But that was just an issue that came up the other day in lab. I thought it was very, very fascinating that people my students kind of went, but why? Joni Mitchell does it. She doesn't rhyme. And I'm going, but she's not writing for the theater where you hear it one time. You know, there's no lyric sheet in front of them. There's no something scroll down. You can't open up the album and follow along the lyrics in the theater. You're hearing the thing for the very first time, and possibly the last time if the show sucks. This is, you want your song to land in the best way you want to do it is to try to find that lyric that's going to make sure it tickles the ear and lands. And in the same token, I was telling the composers to pay attention to that. What notes are you choosing? What harmonies are you choosing? How is your scansion? It was very fascinating teaching. Again, I'll go back to Korea and my fascination. I've taught over there a lot in Korea, and it's a very fascinating journey for me to be over there and enjoy. And I enjoyed it so much because in Korean language, it's very interesting that Korean. And correct me if I'm wrong, my Korean colleagues here. That if that a lot of the information in a sentence is all in the front, and all the less important words are at the end of a sentence. So if you were to, write a song, in Korean, how would you make that information that's so important? In English, we generally mix and match, and we do, and particularly for lyrics here, we zap if we want to point up something, we point it at the end of the line, and we rhyme that, But in Korean, it's And it was fascinating because when I have my Korean students at NYU, very often scansion's always just that thing that's going, they speak it well, they speak English very, very well, they obviously understand. So why is that scansion thing? It's something that it's fascinating. I think it has to do with, something that their own native language has that rhythm. It's not Romance language, per se. So that's been a fascinating thing too. But I also get mad at my English-speaking American students who start sounding like they are from Korea with their scansion. Because without scansion, you just have an unintelligent song going on there. And again, it's just like it's that first time, and I always try to make sure that in my own shows that you hear it once, and if you get it, great. And the singer has to make sure they're very much aware of it too. Some of the dilemmas that I deal with now in the theater are, of course, sound. Because everybody's mic'd now. When I was starting off, we just had invented body mics. That's how old I am. It's just and they didn't have the little things even. They had microphones that were stand like here. So now I have to deal with sound because also too now I've got a new collaborator involved with my words and then with my music, and that's that little guy in the back there in the dark doing that thing, the things there, and it's like, oh, you're actually controlling what my audience is hearing. I have no more control over that. Whoa, what do I do as a songwriter now? How do I make that happen? How do I inform that mixing guy that, that's supposed to be heard there? That's not supposed to be buried in something else there, So that's a new learning curve for me, is to train the mixer guy. It's not necessarily the sound designer. Sound designers are wonderful. There's a lot of great sound designers out there, but it's that little guy that they hire to do that thing there that's actually dictating how your songs are going to be heard every night. And
that's a little tricky. And also doing what your orchestra is going to be doing, if you have an orchestra, you know, how to make sure that the stuff can be sung over that orchestra. And that includes working with a good orchestrator that understands the basics of, you know, pretend there isn't any microphone. It's orchestrated accordingly, which is what I prefer to work with when I work with either Starobin, Michael Starobin, or Bruce Coughlin, or even Tunick, Jonathan Tunick. You know, they understand, okay, pretend there isn't sound, this is what it would sound like. And I like that, because then I go, oh, Michael John, you just buried that. That's going way low in the tessitura. You got this big musical thing there, you can't have that note there, you got to top that one out. And that's when I learn the most, is when that element comes in. But it's been fascinating working downtown in Giant, because that space down there is a little tricky. I wasn't sure if I could do this because I had a full orchestra on stage in the back there. And I wasn't sure, oh my God, I'm going to lose some of these lyrics, what's going to happen here? But I'm very, very pleased with the results. But only because you have to work, again, in tandem with that collaborator. That's kind of a new element to the way that we do theater. So, I don't know, the life of the songwriter, I don't know. I mean, you know, maybe I should have gone down the left street as opposed to going down the right street. But I really love the right street. I love living in this theater world. I love writing the songs for theater. I feel like I feel like being in the theater is where it's at. I've never lost that feeling. And maybe it was because I had a 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Hammer. When I was in 4th grade, I wrote a little musical for my class, and then she said to me, Mrs. Hammer, said to me, she said, you should write musicals when you grow up. And you never doubted the woman, okay? Too scary, Mrs. Hammer, you know. But I did, and I said, okay, I'll do that. And I just thought that's what you did. And I think we all should write musicals when we grow up. So, you know, I encourage everybody to do that. So maybe during the Q&A, I can ask you some questions, and you can ask me some questions about the life of, you know, what it means to what we do. And but what I'm really curious about is hearing some songs. Can we do that today? Let's dive in. Let's hear some tunes there. Introduce yourselves to everybody. And,
do you want a lyric sheet?
You know, it might be helpful to me if you have one. Oh, look at that. See, I always recommend this.
Hi everyone, I'm Joel Wagoner.
I'm Laurie Minette. We're going to do a song from our show, Dead Woman Crossing. It is based on a true-life ghost story set in Georgia in 1905. School teacher Katie wins a rare divorce from her jealous husband Martin and turns up beheaded the next day. The main suspect in the case was a prostitute named Fanny that her husband was involved with. In this particular song, it takes place near the end of Act 1. Our jealous husband, Martin, has become more and more suspicious of Katie's erratic behavior. So he's become convinced that she's cheating on him. We envision this number taking place a little bit out of time and space, so we're seeing kind of a tableau of Katie, maybe in her real life and also in his mind's eye doing things that she's not really doing. So it's a bit filmic in that way.
And we're both fellows from this year.
Last year, actually.
Last year.
We're done now.
We're done. We just finished. Oh, I love the glasses.
I'm old now.
So James Linton. The song's called Where Are You Going Now?